Hola. Bien, preguntó de por ti.
Tampoco si tienes la...
Sí, ahí está, pero...
¿No te puedes conectar?
O sea, espero que la hayan grabado y luego se pueda escuchar. No, ya me vine.
I feel like I'm in a category of beginner, intermediate, or advanced. I'm just at the end of beginner. You know, that place where you realize you're starting to know enough to know that there is so much more to know. Yes. That's where I am.
Now we are there.
Socratic.
Oh, is it? When it comes to learning about humans, I think we're always going back and forward, back.
Okay, I think we are there.
We're there. Yay. Very good. We're good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the part that I am excited to share with you. So the context in my premise is that the context of online teaching and learning is actually excellent for empathy. And some of the reasons why is that we do not have visual or audible characteristics. So when we're online, we can choose to have no gender, we have no age, we have no color of hair, no marital status, we have no social status, no visible social or marital status, we have no visible religious affiliation, we have no handicap, we have no information about our sexual orientation, we have no tattoos, we have no other sign of any group affiliation. So we can actually choose to have a photo or not. But when we are online, we start from a white page, a blank page, which is why we talk about digital identity as being declarative identity. We will choose what we're going to share with others. So in your experience, you perhaps have had some students who don't say much, very timid. They declare very little. You learn about them. If you're lucky to teach the same for more than one course, you'll learn about them in a period of a few years, perhaps. You might also have some students who are very declarative and they tell you more online that you need to know. But it's their choice. An example of this is I have a friend who is 63 years old and she just signed up for her master's degree in psychology at an online university. No one knows that her level of maturity unless she declares it. Compared to her parking in a university campus and every minute she walks into a room about the difference between her and making her question her choice. How crazy am I to go back to school at my age? Those kinds of thoughts that we fight in order to do what we try to do. But the online context allows us to stay away from that constant reminder. We can be who we want online. In fact, this declarative identity also is, oops, sorry, I have the other one. The control over written communication. I have another friend. She came to my house and she told me, in professional development, she said, I only take online classes. Why? Because she says, that's the only place I will contribute. She says, online, I'm not afraid. I will write my opinion. She said, bring me into a classroom. I'm going to be the one who sits in the back and who never raises my hand. So the context of online learning and teaching allows for a great deal of possibilities for true communication or communication that is controlled, which is the part about the written communication. So we, when we write, we take our time to write, organize our thoughts. So that also in the writing style, you have no accent. You can't tell possibly that I'm from another country if I write well enough. There's no local expressions that tell you to have a prejudice or not in terms of how a person communicates. So written, I bring the premise that written communication is a tool for authenticity. And we're all aware that written words say. They're permanent. So I think that when we write, we bring in another level of carefulness in how we communicate to one another, which explains why online identity or teaching and learning online is a great start for the context of empathy. Keep in mind that online identity is a new and complex phenomenon. Some of you might research this. How much do we tell? What triggers us to say more or less when we declare our identity online? And what context? Do we say more about ourselves inside a course, or when we're playing a game, or when we're chatting, or when we're on Facebook? So it's a complex idea. And our online identity is in constant evolution. We always built it. So this is one of the reasons, the online part is one of the reasons why I believe it's a good environment for empathy. But what are the benefits of empathy? Who benefits and how? So I mentioned earlier that we would talk about student engagement, we would talk about academic success, and we'll talk about the decrease of the feeling of isolation. So my approach is that when we build an empathetic culture, we're building a safety net. As you all know, when we learn, we take risk. We put ourselves at risk because learning means that we're accepting that there's something we didn't know before. There's always an element of insecurity. And as you all know, the best learning is in between what we know and the insecurity of what is new. So in that environment, when we create an empathetic culture, we create a safety net. When all is well, all is well. We don't need a safety net when we're at our top performance, when we're comfortable with the topic, when we're performing well, all is well. It's when we start having some sort of life crisis, or as I talk about, trigger event, that we need that safety net. So a trigger event, we'll talk about it, is anything that comes up when things are not well. And it's our opportunity as teachers to give a empathetic response. But students will ask us, depending a little bit on how well we created that safety net. I actually believe that many of our students, they hyper-analyze every answer we give them. They just want to create an idea of who we are as teachers. They will look for any signs in our correspondence to give them that baseline. This is my normal teacher. And if I ask too many questions, this looks like this is my annoyed or aggravated teacher. So when we're creating that culture, we put it in place, we're actually saying your questions will be welcome. And my baseline is to be empathetic and wanting to know what you need from me. So that safety net is for when trouble happens. When there's no troubles, we don't need it. But the thing is, authentic empathy will show up in times of crisis. when we set up that safety net with an empathetic culture, we're not yet put to the test. It's a great intentional and it's strategic and it will be very, very helpful. But then comes the event. We'll talk about that later. And I do not have answers for most of those events. They don't have one answer fit all. But for the creation of the safety net, there are some strategies that we can put in place. Sorry, I'm trying to. There you go. So we talked about student engagement. So an empathetic community will encourage mutual support and collaboration. It's how do you measure student engagement? So you can measure it online by how many times a student will log in or how many times they will participate. But there is a lot more about engagement that is subtle. It's how they encourage one another. And it's also sometimes their activity offline. I don't know if you are aware of it, that there are students who will communicate a lot outside of our courses. I don't always know that. Do you have that experience too sometimes? You know? Not sure. Maybe we don't know. Maybe we don't know. I know that when I'm a student, I have a tendency to communicate with other students outside the platform. So, but those are the kind of ways to measure engagement. One of the ways that I measure engagement is when my students are trying to improve my course. That's one way. When they say, hey, have you seen that resource? Have you heard of this guy? That's one way that I know that they're engaged. And the open forum. Again, as much as they're looking for my baseline, how do I communicate with them? I'm also looking to how they communicate with one another. So sometimes when I see those comments, then I know that there is student engagement happening. And that student engagement is going to foster academic success, but also break the feeling of isolation. So the thing that is measured is the dropout rate of online courses. The studies that I know show that particularly the first years, when we sign up for online programs, the dropout is high. But there is also, so that's how we measure it. It's really hard to measure the level of isolation that people feel. They can be the only one who tell you. But in Quebec, we've had this survey in November 2019. It was a large survey. They've asked 24,000 university students from 14 universities about their level of stress and distress. And it came out that 1 student out of 5, 20%, experienced signs of depression severe enough to require medical attention. And that 9% of them admitted to having thought about suicide. So distress, mental health distress is real. And when this is new, like I said, the survey just came out in November. And when they were already looking at why, they said that the pressure of the competition was one reason, and the lack of support. So we're not in a business of compassion, saving our students necessarily in that sense, but we're part of the support group. So when I'm thinking of lack of support, I'm thinking multifacets, like it could be supports for economic, it could be emotional support, it could be academic support. We can only do so much. But the sense of belonging is one way to support. This is part of what we can do. The part about competition interests me a lot because, okay, so this research seems to indicate that the pressure of competition was so high. But competition is real. And I don't know what you think, and I'd like to hear more what you think. Should we eliminate competition? We can't, right? We can't eliminate it. It's a fact of life. So I like us during the course of the 3 days to think about how to be empathetic in the midst of competition. If competition is real, if we do not wish or should not try to eliminate it and always replace it by collaboration, how can we accompany, how can we lessen the feeling of isolation in the context of competition? Why is it that we should believe that we're always alone when we're competing? We're not necessarily alone when we're competing. Food for thought. I haven't completely thought this one. I'm hoping you can help me with that. The benefits. This is my other favorite part. So empathy reduces stress. This is one thing that I've discovered that I want to share with you. So this is nothing new, because you know, some of you study in psychology, have studies, you know about this, but it's putting it together. So empathy and neuropsychological benefits of it. So if we start with the belief that empathy is objective. We're talking about using it to slow down our emotions and to allow our mind to perceive the situation properly. So when we're going about it this way, that we're trying to understand one another, it creates, I'm going to have to skip because that's how it works. So it is proven that when a person feels understood and connected to another human, their brain will produce oxytocin. Oxytocin is the calming hormone that counters cortisol. So the release of our stress hormone is cortisol. And when we experience empathy, we feel connected with one another, we calm down our stress. So what it does is that it helps us to concentrate better and to respond more adequately to another person. So the benefits is about clarity. So again, if I wasn't clear so far, the process of empathy is to attempt to understand someone. That in exchange gives us a mental clarity, and it allows perspective or the interpretation of what's going on. And it removes prejudice and bias. So online, there is a second activity, and it is, let me see where I have the proper information. No. I just want to do it justice. So I just want to get here. I got it. That's right. So online, there is this little activity for you to do as much or as little as you want. It's called the Implicit Association Test. It was developed by Harvard University. Do you know about it, the Implicit Association Test? So it's open to the general public, and it measures our beliefs. It's a question of speed. So it shows us images with keywords, good, bad, true, false, and it's about how quickly. So it's a very, very concrete measure of attitudes. And it will highlight or give us a result. You do the test 10 minutes and it'll give you a result. What it will tell you is if you have a preference for a certain group. So it will tell you if you have a strong, moderate, slight, moderate or strong prejudice, really. So let's say I believe that men and women are equal. I tell you that. I believe men and women are equal in profession. I do the test about equality, and oh, guess what? My old brain doesn't quite believe it as much as my brain thinks it believes it. So those are the prejudices that we're not aware of, and this wonderful text has, you'll see, you can see how prejudiced you are against gender, sexuality, color of skin, and things like that. So it's very interesting. I was appalled with my own result at first. I was ashamed about the fact that I was prejudiced. I was prejudiced. There's no lying. The result, that result came back saying moderate. At least it wasn't strong. So I hit the middle. But that gave me something to work on. That gave me my utopia of one step forward. And then guess what? The next time that I measured it, and you can't cheat it, I had improved. And I think that I can watch myself improving as I'm aware. But if I'm not aware, there is no improvement that can happen. So when we go for empathy, we have to be aware if we have any bias, prejudice to start with, and try to remove them. Because when we have prejudice, it's like an obstacle. Like yes, I say you are my equal, but I don't fully believe it. There is an obstacle between you and me. So I'm working at reducing those obstacles if I can. So that's the reason for that very renowned implicit IIT test. So because we have prejudice. It's part of our very primitive part of our brain, our amygdala. It's there to protect us against other groups. So the danger that people different than us can cause. So we're hardwired for it. It's our sophisticated part of our brain that keeps trying to override it. No, that person is not a threat for me because they're different. So, and there's a lot of social factor. This is where it gets really complicated. And I don't pretend to know fully how it works, but I understand that socially, the factors modulate our capacity for empathy, which is the only explanation that I can imagine for the atrocity of this world. That we somehow, with this amygdala overpowering us, believe that others are a threat to us, simply because they belong to another religion or a different whatever, fill in the blank. So empathy is that curiosity, no judgment if possible, no prejudice if possible, to find out what is it like. And that's the part that happens here in our brain. But it creates mental clarity. And the most amazing thing that I found is this. So the neuropsychological impacts of practicing, not just learning about, but using it, empathy, has the double effect. It allows to reduce the stress of the person receiving our empathy, as well as the person being empathetic. To me, this was my big aha moment. Because the more I intentionally became empathetic, trying to understand people's context, the better I felt. It helped my own well-being. I could actually face just about anything in my teaching experience because I didn't get swallowed up into the difficulty of it because I took that step to analyze it. We'll talk about the cheater on Wednesday. So that's what empathy does on the neuropsychological. Now, on the other side, when we're not in that place of clarity and calm, we're into that negative stress. So those strong emotions, they will activate the production of cortisol, and it will bring distortion of our cognitive capacities. We can't think straight as much. We will have a tendency to generalize, and we will have a tendency to think that our point of view prevails. or that our point of view is the same as everyone else. And I would add to this that we have the tendency of thinking us versus them. So these are the ways that I catch myself. Often if I catch myself generalizing or making assumptions like this, I'm thinking, I'm in the negative stress part right now. I'm reacting to a situation. I'm not in the empathetic, trying to understand it. But there are something to be said about the positive or negative stress. So what about the stress that pushes us into action or gets your student to do their work the night before? It is indeed, there are two types of stress, as we know, the occasional stress and the chronic stress. But there are research that say that if we experience chronic stress, it's counterproductive for learning. You might not know if your students are in a position of occasional or chronic stress. It's for them to assess that. But it will be really hard to learn anything when we're chronically stressed. And that brings me to the practical strategies and tools. So the question is, how can we teach empathy online or put empathetic strategies, and should we? Is it our job? Does it have enough? Did I convince you? Is there enough impacts that justify that we can take this to the next step? That's usually into the making of it that we get some of these answers. But for now, 10 minutes is perfect. Yeah. So for now, I would like to get one feedback about that. Should we? Should we teach empathy? Should we build that into our online courses?
Yes. Should we try to put it in practice?
Should we come back on Wednesday?
Here in Mexico, we have a saying that says the lion thinks everything or everybody is like him. So this is a kind of prejudice the teacher has. So when a student says, I couldn't do my homework, you think, you're cheating me. You didn't do your homework because you were saying another things. Because it's what you maybe would have done, and you project that decision from yours to your students. So you can put in this position of empathy, because you are thinking like if you were doing the things, not like your student maybe are doing.
We could get it wrong. We could totally get it wrong. For us in Canada, we have this saying, I don't know if you have the same one, my dog ate my homework. You do? Same thing? My dog ate my homework. As teachers, I don't know if my tendency was to think in terms of excuses. Do you sometimes catch yourself thinking, this is just another excuse? Yeah. Thinking in terms of excuses is a way to generalize. Anything else?
I was thinking about what you said of how much students put out there of themselves.
Yeah.
And I think it's important not just what you want to share, but what you have to share. Like if you're feeling isolated or you're having struggle with anything, it is not just asking about a certain topic, but about getting others to know your situation sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it might be negative, like in your friend's case, that she didn't want to say he am 60 and studying this. But maybe, yes, it is relevant to identify these students who have very important.
Exactly. In the experience of my friend, and I will bring her up because she has a few examples that I think are pertinent for our studies. She revealed more of her to the teachers that she thought had the empathy to accept her equally. So she was very, very careful who she would say what to. And I have a feeling that our students are choosing how much they reveal, just like we do.
Maybe this is just my bias, but maybe she had some trouble with technology. This is just a bias because of knowing her.
Because of her age?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Come on. Come on. Where did that come from?
It's part of the brain.
It's prejudice.
Yeah, but I think it's important to establish what others have to know about us.
And it's evolutive. It will evolve. How much we say now could be quite different to how much we say next week. It's in constant movement.
I have a question here in the chat about this neuronal mirrors. And they want to know how is it that they are related with empathy.
From what I know about it, and many of you have more expertise, what I know about it is that the mirror neurons, they've been studied as, if you're feeling nervous, I feel nervous because my neuron mirror yours. Simply said, this is my understanding of it. And if you're interested in the topic of empathy, you will hear that they are resistant to it. There is even a book, it's called Against Empathy. Paul Bloom is the author. And I think that often this is where the negative reputation of empathy comes from, is from that exact situation where we're talking about the emotion. So we don't want to be in a mirror neuron situation where we pick up the stress or the distress of our students. So that's not a reason not to be empathetic if we understand how it works and we use the cognitive aspect of it. But for instance, the idea of this man who wrote Against Empathy and the mirror neuron, he will give you this example. This young girl needs a liver transplant, and she's on a list at this known hospital. And if you know more about her situation, if you know which family she comes from, or if you know the situation of her context, you might be more empathetic to say, yes, she should move up the list. So basically what this man is saying is we make wrong decisions if we base it on our feeling of compassion towards that young girl, because we know more about her, versus if we know little and then she's one of them. Those are the kind of...
Yeah. Could it be that these people that are against empathy at certain point is misunderstood about what empathy means? Because sometimes I've heard this in one teacher that he would say, I'm against empathy, you know, because for him it would mean to justify everything in the other person.
Yes.
You know, and I don't think that is empathy. You know, trying to understand another people's position, trying to be on their feet, as we say here in Mexico, is one thing, but that does not necessarily liberates you of certain responsibility or certain commitment or certain things.
Absolutely. And I've had teachers talk to me very strongly against empathy because they feel that their students will walk all over them. they will just take advantage of a kind approach. And there is validity. I'm going to be empathetic with these people. I am actually. I listen. I want to know what they need. Being empathetic doesn't mean we cave in. On the contrary, when I've experienced empathetic approach and trying to understand what is really going on, I am much more clear. And sometimes I have been even more firm about my position than if I would have just used some sort of generalization. But I just find that empathy makes me more clear about my decisions, not less.
Mhm.
And sometimes the best response to our situation is to be firm, right? To be firm.
I don't know if you've heard of Kahneman and diversity on linguistics and biases.
Oh no.
They say, well, they have experiments these biases. Well, in order to understand the big picture, sometimes we just take small pieces, and with these small pieces, we make that decision, and it doesn't have to be right all the time. But this is something that we're constantly doing, like on a daily basis.
Mhm, mhm.
But by using empathy and trying to get the whole picture, we can take also maybe some decisions that are better than just using the biases.
More adapted.
Yeah.
And that's what we will do in a project in the days to come. The idea of the project is not a huge amount of time unless you choose to.
Mhm.
So the idea is to put yourself in the shoes of a student. So you will create a profile of a student. Maybe it would be a good idea if we can show
The
online.
Moodle? Yes.
Mhm, Moodle. So you've been divided in groups, 6 groups of 10. You'll find your groups when you go into the day 2. So the activity is called assignment, create a student profile. So I even gave you a list of the popular Mexican names, so you can pick a name. So you'll pick a name, someone strange that you don't know. And then you will decide on the gender, on the age, on the academic path of the student, get attached a little bit with that student, and something about him or her, maybe a hobby or something. And then you will describe that person. But I'm asking you to think about 3 core values for that person. And this is all on Moodle as well. And I gave you a list of all the possible core values, because sometimes we need a reminder. So you're gonna imagine that student of yours. That student is very loyal, or that student is very generous, or that student is for him it's very important fairness. Any of those core values, and you're gonna describe yourself, integrating that a little bit, the core value. Either you say, I'm Jose, I'm very generous, or you just hide it a little bit in the description. I'll ask you to also present a fear. One fear that your student has. Again, most likely you won't want to just declare it, so you'll hide it maybe a little bit in the text. And one ambition. So that way your student is going to be a bit 3-dimensional. So you just create a profile, a few lines. You can write in Spanish, please do. The language that you're most comfortable. So if you...
Yes, I have it not, it's not, you have to enter it in your computer because that one is the one that is projecting here. And I have it for the people online.
Okay, would you mind? Sure. So that's the first part, simple. The second part, you will think of an event, I call it a trigger event, an event that you have experienced when teaching or learning online. And don't tell us about who it was or how it was resolved, but what happened. It could be someone was not getting it, so a request for clarity. It could be someone was an overachiever, wanted more from you, or someone was not handing in their work on time, or had a family crisis, anything you've experienced in your life. And describe it without telling us how you resolved it, how you addressed it, or too much of what it was. So basically now we have students and we have trigger events. Guess what comes next? So then the third part is you will write an empathetic response to the situation where you've matched your student with an event, and then you'll get feedback. So it's simple like that, and not that simple. So for those of you who were able to go in, so this was the greeting page. The day one is where you had the survey about your shared experience, and you had the online project implicit. Each day you have the resources of the day, which includes this PowerPoint, the recording, and also a summary sheet, and additional resources for any one of you who wish to take it further. You can download everything with the folder. Now, day two is where you see the assignment. So create a student. So if you open create the student, this is where I'm giving you a link for names, core values. Oh, you can even pick an avatar. You can even decide to give it a feature if you want. And what you do is you would see that there are some groups. So you'll find yourself in one of those groups, and you add a new discussion topic. So I've done it so that you can see everyone, but you can only comment in your own group. So go explore, see what else. It'll be very rich because we'll get to have a sample of all sorts of students and all sorts of situations. And if some situations repeat themselves, it's okay. It just means they're common. And then the assignment about the real life trigger, same idea. So just a short description to record a real life trigger. Again, write in Spanish, write in your language where it's easier so that you can have all the nuance of it. And then we'll have the assignment about submit a response and then give a feedback. There is another forum that you'll see. So every day I have a general forum for that day. So any other idea that you want to contribute, and also resources if you see anything that you want to share. So there's a forum for each day. And on day two, when we talk more about strategies, there is a specific forum about description of our students that will take you a few minutes. So that basically that's it. That's the project. And on day three, we'll come back and discuss it and take it further. Where do we go from now? Will be day three. What did I forget? I think that's pretty much it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's
So
see if we have any questions here in the
thank
chat.
you so much for your patience. Oh,
Yes, thank you.
I have treats in my office. I brought them from Canada. I have candy. So if anyone wants to come and chat with me, we'll have candy.
Sí. Bueno, pues gracias también a todos los que están conectados. Creo que tenemos un comentario aquí. Bueno, que muchas gracias a todo el equipo y felicidades por la presentación.
Gracias.
No dice el nombre, dice alumnos, entonces no sé exactamente quién es, pero gracias por el comentario, gracias por la paciencia, por esperarnos un momentito ya. Miércoles todo estará funcionando bien. Pero bueno, cualquier duda, cualquier comentario, pues, tiene el correo de Mireille, está la plataforma. Yo soy de acompañante y de soporte, pero si me quieren escribir, también me pueden escribir. Y pues ahora hay trabajo en línea y nos vemos el miércoles. Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos los que están acompañándonos en línea y los esperamos también el miércoles. Y cualquier comentario, pues está la plataforma de Moodle. Muchas gracias a todos.
Make eye contact much with everyone. It's always the same.